Hello and welcome to another edition of Bible Time. We're going through our daily Bible reading, Believers Fellowship. I'm Pastor Blakey. Today we come to 2 Samuel, chapters 15 through 17. And we're seeing that even though we're in the time of David's troubles, these stories are not happy stories. There's a lot for us to learn, not only on a personal level, but we're learning big picture things as well. Here we're seeing the consequences of David's sin. We're seeing that God disciplines his people when they sin, and David's experiencing that discipline in these chapters. We're also seeing David's trust in God to accomplish God's purposes for David. God made a covenant with David, unconditional covenant, not dependent upon what David does, and so we see David actually. In the midst of his consequences, which he recognizes are from God, he's also trusting God that God's still going to fulfill the purposes and the plans and the promises that he made. And here you see Absalom, who was brought back to Jerusalem. We saw that yesterday, but he's working to create a rebellion against David. Absalom wants to be the king, and he's starting a rebellion, and he's very patient about it. It's a 4-year period that's covered here. And he takes a very modern approach to us. He manufactures an image. He runs a PR campaign. He makes everybody love him. He makes himself look like the good guy. And his dad, David the king, he's not really doing the job. Sounds a lot like modern political commercials being run by Absalom himself. My name is Absalom, and I approve of this commercial. But anyways, he runs this rebellion, and the people get behind him. And David gets wind of it, and so David flees Jerusalem. And I don't think it's so much that David needed to flee Jerusalem, but he did it for the sake of all the people of Jerusalem. A fight in Jerusalem, a war in Jerusalem, a lot of innocent people are going to die. So David and his family, his people, they all leave sacrificially, and they head down to the Jordan River, the fords of the Jordan River. When you read it, it just sounds like it's just a hop, skip, and a jump. It's a 17-mile walk. And Jerusalem's on top of a mountain, and where they are at the Jordan River, they would have gone through Jericho. They're near the Dead Sea. They're below sea level. So this is quite a hike down to the Jordan River. And the story goes on, and Absalom comes into Jerusalem. David shows great humility all along the way. This guy Shimei is cursing him, throwing rocks at him. Abishai says, let me just go cut his head off. Nice guy, Abishai. But David is humble, says maybe the Lord sent him to do this. David is just trusting the Lord. And you see in chapter 16, verses 20 to 22, what Absalom does with the concubines of David that were left behind. It's a direct fulfillment of chapter 12, verse 11, what God said would happen. So you don't think your sin has consequences on other people? Ask these 10 concubines about that. But anyways, it's Absalom's come in. He's taken over. He asked for counsel from Ahithophel regarding what he should do. Ahithophel gives him good counsel, but for some reason he asks Hushai. And David has certain people on the inside there that are going to keep him informed and help him. He's got the 2 priests, Zadok and Abiathar, and he's got Hushai. And Hushai gives different counsel than Ahithophel. And Absalom decides to go with Hushai for some reason. And Ahithophel at that point recognizes, well, this is a done deal. There's no way, unless we act right now, follow my counsel, it's not going to happen. So he goes home, writes out his will, and then commits suicide. Ahithophel. Does that name sound familiar? Ahithophel is the grandfather of who? He's the grandfather of Bathsheba. Ahithophel became a counselor. He joined in. He was a co-conspirator with Absalom. He apparently wasn't very happy about what David did with Bathsheba. But anyways, he commits suicide, and Absalom follows Hushai's counsel and rounds up the whole army, and they head out. But there's one thing I want you to take note of, and that is in chapter 15, verse 31. I want you to take note of the prayer of David. It says that it was told David, Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. And David said, "O Lord, please turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness." That's his prayer. Very specific prayer, asking the Lord to do something. And David didn't just pray, he took action. The following verses talk about how he had Zadok, Abiathar, the priests, who are going to be informing him, and he's got Hushai who's going to be kind of helping him from the inside. And so David is not just praying, he's taking action. That's an important thing for you and me to take note of. Sometimes we pray, but then we don't do anything. Or sometimes we just do something, whatever, without praying. And so we see an important lesson here from David, a man after God's own heart, a man who knew how to pray. And then later, when Ahithophel gives his counsel to Absalom, which was the right counsel, for some reason, he asks Hushai. For some reason, providentially, he asks Hushai, and then he follows the counsel that Hushai gives him. David prayed, God answered. David had confidence in God's promises, and David prayed in line with those promises. God answered those prayers. There's an important lesson for you and me. That, David has confessed his sin. He's repented of his sin. He's been forgiven of his sin. And he knows that, but he also knows he's suffering the consequences of his sin, but he knows that God is still going to be faithful to the promises that he's made. That's an important lesson for you and me to learn. God will be faithful. David prayed and God acted, just like God had promised that he would in taking care of David. So there's an important lesson for you and me to learn. You want to know more about what was going on in David's heart during this time? You can read Psalms 61, 62, and 63 that were all written during this time of Absalom's rebellion. So we're learning a lot from these chapters that talk about the troubles, the consequences that David faced because of his sin. But these are valuable lessons for you and me to learn today. And we're going to learn more as we continue tomorrow with more Bible Time.